Sunday dinner at Mom's house was mandatory. It was the rhythm of our family. Every Sunday like clockwork, grill smoke curling up from the patio, laughter spilling out between the lemon tree and the back door, a string of folding chairs, and Patricia, my mother, sipping a glass of wine and issuing quiet directions from her seat by the sliders. I would arrive with Daniel in his tiny jacket, cheeks warm from the car, and we would settle into the ritual as if it were a duty we both performed for her. I am albino. I have been my whole life. It is one more thing anyone in the family could use to mark me as different, besides the fact I was the daughter who stayed, who sent money, who handled appointments and phone calls. Daniel, at 6, knew none of the ledgered deaths or the co-signed loans. He only knew the feeling of being seen or unseen. He could tell, even at the table, when someone glanced past him like he was a light fixture. He would look down at his hands or at the worn spot on the table where the ketchup bottle sat, and try to make his small presence smaller. That evening, the kids were louder than usual. There was a soccer ball that thudded against the patio rail, a clatter of plastic cups, the particular metallic sound of a paper plate being forked. Lauren had arranged the chairs in the same places she always did. Greg talked about work in a tone that solicited applause. My mother moved between the patio and the window, overseeing, approving. I sat with my back to the grill, Daniel's jacket folded over his knees. He was quiet. He always went quiet when the room turned toward other things. Sensitive, someone said about Daniel, and it was said like a diagnosis. Toughen up, someone else answered, smiling. None of the adults meant it as violence. They meant it as guidance. They meant it as humor, but the words land the way they are built. The kids heard the tone and followed it. Connor, Lauren's son, was 12, lanky and fast, and already skilled at the particular teenage brand of cruelty kids learn early. He chased Daniel around the yard with a grin, calling him names that were clever in the way that quiet barbs often are. "Dummy," he said once, loudly, and a few of the kids laughed. A soda can bounced. My son flinched. I put my hand on his shoulder and tried to make my touch look casual. The adults watched. No one intervened. No one made a face. The small tolerances accumulated. Plate passed over Daniel as if he were invisible. A story told that finished before his 6-year-old voice could catch up. A game that required an inside joke he was not part of. I am a mother. I have sat through many small slights. I have learned to count them, one after the other, like the slow ringing of a bell. If this resonates with you, if you've ever left a family gathering with a hollow place in your chest where someone else's words had landed, leave one word in the comments, the word that best describes how it felt. Just one. We moved inside when the air cooled. The dishes made a soft, constant sound. Conversation drifted between the countertops and the living room. I was talking with Lauren about Daniel's school when Connor came up behind me and mouthed something. At first I thought it had been part of the game. Then I saw his face settle. He looked directly at me, not at my son. He pointed. He shaped the words slowly, deliberately, as if he were tasting them and wanted someone else to take part in the cruelty. He did not shout. He did not have to. Trash belongs outside. The house went peculiarly quiet in that space after a sentence like that, like someone had taken the volume out of the room. You could hear a wine glass shift on the patio. Lauren blinked. My mother froze with a spoon in her hand. Greg's laugh halted midair. The kids didn't know to be still yet. They kept shifting, but the noise had a different edge. The thing about a line like that, short, savage, precise, is that it can happen so quickly you almost miss it. It passes cleanly through the air and lands on the person it's aimed at. It landed on me. He had not said it as an observation about the yard. He had not asked a stranger to take out trash. He had aimed it. Trash. Outside. Like an instruction. Like I was a thing left on the curb. I could feel the weight of 7 years then. Years of phone calls, of mortgage co-signing, of monthly transfers done before I had my coffee, of being the one my mother relied on while everyone else smiled and ate her cooking. I could feel the 1,000 tiny deferrals of being treated less than fully human. My stomach tightened. My hands went firmer on the back of a chair. Daniel looked up at me, face pinched. I told him softly, "Let's go." He pushed the chair back with a scrape, jacket flapping. He came to me like he always did, small and trusting. I took his hand. I did not argue. I did not call names back. I did not create a scene. I walked out with my son and closed the door behind us. Outside, the night smelled of grill smoke and lemon rind. The soccer ball lay abandoned against the rail. I could hear the muffled conversation through the glass, as if it belonged to someone else's dream. Daniel's hand was small in mine. I felt how quickly he had become my marker, how I measured my physical distance from cruelty by how tight his fingers were in mine. We got into the car. Daniel sat in the back, his legs too short for the edge of the seat. He fiddled with the zipper of his jacket. In the hush of that small space, he said, "Why did he say that, Mommy?" His voice was the kind that asks questions because it thinks answers are always waiting. I told him, "Some people are mean when they don't understand. Sometimes they say cruel things because they're following the way others act." He listened. He blinked slowly, like a person deciding how much to file away. He smelled of grass and ketchup and a little of the lemon tree. I told him, "You are not trash. You are mine." I remember driving without a destination, the streetlights sliding past. I did not cry the way people expect when something shames you in front of your family. I felt a steady, cold clarity instead. This is not a moment that can be patched with words. This is a pattern. The discomfort was not only a matter of embarrassment. It was accounting, emotional, moral, financial. We went home. Daniel fell asleep on the couch with the television flickering cartoons he didn't really watch. The room smelled like the pizza I ordered because I didn't have the energy to make dinner. I sat at the kitchen table and let the quiet settle. I did not sleep. I opened my banking app. It is a strange intimacy, rubbing your thumb across a screen and watching numbers that are the visible side of 7 years. I have sent $3,200 a month to my mother for 7 years. The figure sat there, small and ordinary, until I multiplied it in my head. It became $268,800. With extra payments, medical bills I helped with, a car loan I co-signed, being a guarantor on other debts, the number in my head was closer to $300,000. Those numbers had been a kind of currency for love in my life. I would keep things stable, and in exchange I would be accepted. Except love does not tally neatly into equal exchanges. It creates expectations. It hides obligations. Over time, money had become the way the family treated me instead of overcoming the way they treated me. I started to write. I wrote out dates. I copied transfers. I pulled up old emails and bank receipts. Every monthly transfer had a note: mom support, or Patricia, rent. There were payments for prescriptions, hospital bills where I was listed as a secondary payer, a lease we had signed when she needed a small down payment, and the car I had helped secure as my signature. There were text messages that showed me asking for help in scheduling doctor appointments, and my mother's replies that implied I should not worry. I made a document. I itemized the monthly transfers, the additional checks I had written, the co-signed loan amounts, the medical guarantor fees. I did not invent anything. I set the spreadsheet beside the calendar and let it be what it was. I could have let an approximate number stay in my head. 300,000 felt right to the part of me that had kept the receipts. But facts are kinder for decision-making. Facts are less open to argument. I drafted an email. The subject line was simple. I wrote in a calm voice what I had done and why. I attached the itemized list. I stated that I had stopped the monthly transfers and removed the saved recipient from my banking profile. I noted that I would no longer be co-signing on any new loans, and that I had contacted any institutions where I could, in good conscience, ask to be removed as a guarantor. I did not threaten. I did not gloat. I wrote that this was a boundary I was choosing for the safety of my son and my own dignity. Then I hit send. The phone started buzzing before I had finished making the coffee. Lauren's name flashed. Greg called. Kevin texted from out of state, alarmed and a little incredulous. My mother called. Her voice was thin and pleading. The car lender left a voicemail about a missed automatic payment that had been linked to our shared account, one of those mechanical dominoes that fall away when a link is severed. I heard my own voicemail tone in the background, the sound of a life turning a corner. Lauren came to the door eddying. She stood on my porch holding her keys like a small thing, like an offering. Her face was written with urgency and anger and fear, all in the same lines. "You took it away," she said. "You can't just do that." I let her say what she needed to say. Her voice said 100 things I already suspected: how it would affect my mother, how it would affect the household, how inconvenient my decision would be now that dinner plans and bills were structured around something I had kept supporting. Her accusations were the neat, practiced category. She had rehearsed the idea that money begets duty. I answered simply. I told her that I could not let my son be taught, even by implication, that his mother is trash. I told her that I had been making sacrifices, and that those sacrifices were not acknowledged the way they should be. I said I had made this decision to protect my child and my own sense of worth. I said it plainly, without melodrama. Lauren's eyes filled. She moved into a softer grief. She asked for reconsideration. She begged me to think about the consequences. I told her I had. I had thought about the consequences until they were as measurable as the payments on a spreadsheet. I did not say it to wound her. I said it because I wanted her to know this was not a rashness. It was a calculation. My mother called later that night. Her voice was the voice of a woman who had been depending on a routine. She apologized, then, in the same breath, asked for a plan. She asked if we could make a new arrangement, if I would come back to the old schedule. I listened. I thought about the way she had watched her grandson be humiliated and not moved. I thought about 7 years of being the household's credit line and emotional safety net. I said that words were not enough this time. I said that apologies would not back up checks or restore ways of being. I said that we could talk about what a different relationship looked like, but that for now I could not resume funding the life I had been, not with commitments that matched the change. The next few days were a blur of texts and calls. People who had relied on the steady cadence of a monthly deposit suddenly had to recalibrate. There was anger, practical, sharp, about missed payments and altered budgets. There was also confusion. Several people accused me of dramatic theater. A lender called again, voicemail full of protocol and late fee warnings. I ignored most of it at first. I saved the messages and let them sit in a folder labeled callbacks, the way you do with receipts that will eventually require action. My son watched me through it all with the patient curiosity of a small spectator. He did not ask about the money. He asked one question that mattered. "Will we still do pizza night?" he said, the way a child tests foundations. "Yes," I said, and meant it. We would do pizza night. We would do movies and board games. We would remake Ritual so that it would be a place where he was spoken to kindly and where his mother's skin and face were part of the house's welcome. Sunday dinner could be rebuilt in the 2-bedroom apartment if we needed it. The point was not how many people crowded the table. The point was the tenor of the conversation when he was at it. I will not pretend it was easy. Money matters are messy. There are obligations you cannot always unweave. The car lender's notices had teeth. A co-signature takes time to disentangle. There were bills that would take weeks to reroute. The nightly relief I felt, the one that came from knowing my child would not be taught that he was less, was real, and it was accompanied by the practical inconvenience of finance changing. That is the nature of boundaries that cost. They are moral and they are fiscal at once. There were people who called me cruel. There were people who said I had abandoned my mother. There were others who, quietly, told me they understood. Kevin, from across the state, said, "I'm sorry it's gotten to this." He did not mean it as absolution. He meant it as witness. It mattered. I do not sugarcoat the psychological work that followed the initial decision. I had to set routines that were protective. I had to teach Daniel that his worth was not contingent on the family's approval. I had to model not only firmness but tenderness. So we made a list. Sunday at my place. Pizza, blankets, a movie he picked. Saturday morning, pancakes with extra syrup. These were small things, easy to note. They were, crucially, things he and I could hold and trust. On one of the first Sundays after I stopped the transfers, we ate in mismatched plates and watched an old animated film until it was late. Daniel fell asleep on my lap, face soft and untroubled. I looked at the slant of his hair and the way the light caught the freckles along his nose, and I felt something like peace settle into me. It was not a triumph so much as a relief from the slow erasure I had been enduring. I am not telling this story to urge everyone to cut off their family. That would be an irresponsible, sweeping argument that ignores nuance and context. I am telling it because sometimes people ask why someone who has given so much, time, money, emotional labor, would finally refuse to give more. There comes a point where continuing to fund someone's life means funding the conditions that allowed you to be diminished. I reached that point. I also do not want to make Connor into a caricature villain.
He is 12. He had learned behaviors. He has adults around him who had not corrected him. Children steal the tones of the adults who raise them. His words were cruel, and they were taught. That does not absolve the harm, it locates it. His cruelty reflected a household that had not been willing to defend me, as a mother, as a person, as a woman living in the world with visible difference. That was the real problem. The practical fallout persisted. My mother needed to make adjustments. There was no miraculous overnight change. She economized differently. She rearranged subscriptions and budgeted more closely. Sometimes, when she called, she sounded sharp and resentful. Sometimes she sounded ashamed. I listened, sometimes from a place of empathy, sometimes from a place of boundary. I did not fill the old gap, because doing so would teach my son that dignity is optional. There were small compensations too. I learned to accept help differently. I allowed friends to bring over casseroles. I accepted a neighbor's offer to watch Daniel for an afternoon while I caught up on paperwork. The world, it turns out, contains people who will step into a vacuum when you create one. The lesson was not only about loss, but about the possibility of chosen family, people who see you and treat you as human. I have a file on my computer named Patricia Payments. It is not punitive. It is practical. It has dates and amounts and memos. I have kept copies of the emails I sent and the receipts to show that I acted with clarity and consistency, not in a rush of anger. That document will sit in my records until the day it is either irrelevant or validated by whatever reconciliation might occur. The decisive moment remains the whisper. Trash belongs outside. The phrase is a pivot in my memory. It is short and it is sharp. It was not the only reason I stopped supporting my mother, but it was the last straw that made a private calculus into a public boundary. I took my child's hand and left because protecting him in that second mattered more than maintaining a habit that had been damaging me. If someone had stood up in that living room when Connor mouthed the words, if one of the adults had said, "No, that is not how we speak about people who are different," maybe this would have been a teachable moment. Maybe Lauren would have corrected him in the instant, and I would have stayed. But no one did, and beyond that silence was a ledger of years that allowed silence to feel like permission. Now, when Sunday comes, Daniel knows we have choices. He knows family can be many things. He also knows that boundaries look like making a different sort of supper, or saying no to a relationship pattern that makes you smaller. He knows that when his mother says he is not trash, she means it. He knows that I will take his hand and leave if someone suggests otherwise. I do not regret the email. I do not regret the nights of sorting receipts. Those were not minimal acts.
They were the way I matched words with consequence. Saying, "I will not send you money anymore," without explaining why, would have been arbitrary. Explaining and documenting was not about shaming. It was about being accountable, to myself and to my son. There are moments when I still receive a text that asks me to reconsider, or a voicemail that sounds tired and small. I read them and I put them in a folder. Sometimes I call back. Sometimes I write a note and leave it unsent. Healing is neither linear nor poetic. It is messy and practical. It includes buying pizza on a Sunday and insisting the good plates be used. It includes making lists and being present when a 6-year-old needs to be told his worth. The night Daniel fell asleep on my lap, I felt the work of the last few weeks fold into something softer. There was fatigue, yes, and there was the continuing realism of bills that needed attention. There was also a small, stubborn peace that came from knowing I had chosen my son's dignity over convenience. I had chosen, finally, to refuse the slow indignity of being treated as disposable. If you have ever had to make a boundary that cost you something, emotionally, financially, socially, there is no simple answer I can offer. But there is one thing I can say. The quiet dignity of taking your child's hand and walking away mattered more than the polite approval of a house where you were not defended. That decision reshaped our routines and taught my son a lesson about worth that no amount of money could buy. Sunday dinners continue to happen in different forms. Sometimes my mother calls to talk about a small detail. Sometimes we meet for coffee in a neutral place with new rules. I listen. I stand up for myself. I explain the logic again, not as a lecture, but as a fact of our lives. The ledger is still there, and some conversations will take time. In the end, what I wanted most was not to punish. I wanted my son to know that he would not be taught he was less by the people who claimed to love him. I wanted him to have simple, consistent rituals that made him feel safe. I wanted to stop paying for the silence that allowed a child to say, "Trash belongs outside," and have it go unanswered. He is asleep now in the next room, a small weight under a blanket, cheeks flushed from a day of running and pizza. I watch him breathe in the dim light, and the old ache eases. We have rebuilt Sunday from the inside out. We have pizza on paper plates, and a remote that keeps slipping under the couch. We have a habit of slow mornings, and a rule. No one speaks of someone else if they are less than human. If this story reached you in a place where you are deciding what to do next, about boundaries, about family, about dignity, know that decision-making is messy. If you want to talk about boundaries or share a one-word reaction to what you felt in the first part, leave that word below. I read those words. They matter.
If you want more stories about protecting what matters and how to find peace in ordinary life, subscribe and join the conversation. I will share what I have learned, how to build rituals that keep a child safe, how to keep records without letting bitterness harden you, and how to move from hurt toward a quieter strength. For now, I will go check on my son and make sure his blanket is pulled up to his chin. The whisper is still there in my bones, but it no longer has the power it once did. I held my child's hand and left. We found a new table to sit at.